Hello, I'm Justin O'Crow from Scatterwork, and I'm here to present this Breakthrough Project Barriers Strategies for Success workshop. And it's entitled Stakeholder Engagement That Drives Success. And it'll be available also on YouTube. So just before we get going, I'd like to introduce Scatterwork. In case you haven't met us before, what we do is we meet global challenges with managed success. So any business has initiatives or assignments or projects or ventures or whatever you care to call them to implement the plans. And this is challenging, particularly for these categories. For example, when the project or the assignment and so on is very expensive, like infrastructure, building a railway or a motorway or something like that. Or maybe if it's urgent, you can't afford to mess around and be late. Or maybe it's distributed. Maybe the people that are involved are all over the place. And it's very hard to get them together and to get everyone to share a view of what they're doing. And another category is not only where people are distributed, but they're living in different cultures. So people will have different ways of interacting with each other, a different opinion of what's late and on time, and all that sort of stuff. So any of these challenges here make it really difficult to deliver on these challenges. So we have a bag of tools which is called project management, and it helps you deliver in this sort of environment, and it leverages from experience, and it makes it much easier to achieve your goals. So that's what we do. And well, why would you bother to engage with us? Well, we have many well-known clients, as you can see here, and also a lot of SMEs. The names are not up. You probably wouldn't recognize most of them. And we operate at all levels, all organizational levels, from shop floor right up to senior management. Now, because project management skills and methodology can be applied across sectors, our clients are across sectors. And these here is a list of sectors that we've been involved in over the years. So we're not in absolutely everything, but tendentially things that have some sort of technical implementation or background. We've worked across the globe. We've had experience in actually in over 40 countries, but as well as that, we've dealt with a lot of people, maybe from 10 or 15 other countries where we've worked with them online. So how do we do it? Well, we have a step-by-step framework, and what we do is we have a challenge. We have 10 challenges that basically lead us through the various steps of project management. So rather than saying that you should do this and you should do that, we ask the question, how are you going to do this and how are you going to do that? And these items here, they add up. They correspond to the normal body of experience on project management. And in fact, these workshops that you're on now correspond to one of these. We're looking at the one number 2 there: engage your stakeholders to drive success. And an important feature is that all the examples that we draw on in live events are drawn from the challenges of the participants. So that makes them directly relevant, and it also means that whatever they learn can be used immediately. There's a challenge here, you can read it up on our website as well, where a client had products that had pharmaceutical additives, and because of that, when they were being sold in China, they had to be registered one by one. And that proved very difficult for this company, a very big company with head office in Europe and a long way from China. So what we did is that we worked with them, and we identified a standard process for getting the products recognized or registered. And then what happened was that our client, the next time he met his client, he said, "Well, we have this standard way of doing it." And the client said, "Well, very good. Yeah, we're happy with that." And then he said, "And we think it would be fair if you took half the costs." And they said, "Yeah, that's fine." So he halved his costs, and he got a very engaged stakeholder in China. So that resolved completely this issue of being on the outside culturally and so forth. And obviously it led to much easier solution for his recording. So that's that's just one example of things that we've been involved in. So our story is that long ago, I myself was involved. I was working from Ireland, and that's an island. And by definition, we had huge trouble with communication, the cost of flying anywhere, or even in those days, a fax. If you got a fax, it was an international telephone call and expensive, even to receive one, not just to send them. So the Scatterwork Company was established in 2008, and we've been ahead of the curve ever since. So when COVID came along, it was all a style of working we're already used to. And so we exploit talent wherever it is to minimize travel and to improve on climate-friendly practices. And what we actually do is we apply our skills here to empowering teams, achieving priorities, and driving success. Our consultants all hold PMP, and they're in different parts of the world, and they have collectively a very high level of experience. And if you want to get a free check of your own project, you can do it by scanning the code there. It'll lead you through a questionnaire, and then at the end of that, if you wish, you can have a free review with one of our experts to look at your project and maybe point out some things that might be improved, or and that's all at no cost to you. Okay, so we're into the content of this presentation now, and we want to engage our stakeholders to get success. So the key thing about this is that stakeholders are people that are interested in the project, and it includes obviously people like your own management who said, please do this project. But it also includes people, maybe neighbors, who either like or don't like what you're doing, or maybe people in other departments and so on. And our job is to interact with those people in such a way that they support the project. And generally speaking, people are so busy, they're not going to do anything unless you give them a way of doing it and some sort of structure. So that's what we're talking about here. These workshops, webinars, we run them roughly monthly. They're based on our step-by-step framework. So you could sign in for one of these events and then sign in for another one. And if you do the complete cycle, roughly over a year, you will have been through the whole lot. Projects start with stakeholders, because stakeholders include the people who are going to say, this is what we want. And a project in a sort of formal sense is something that you're going to do once, or it's new. It's something that there are elements of it that you haven't done exactly like that before. Maybe you've done something very similar, but you haven't done something exactly, and all the details that are separate you need to work through. And at the end of the project, some of the stakeholders, that particularly the ones that gave you the assignment, will either say, that was pretty good, or no, it wasn't so good. And it depends on their opinion. And of course, opinion depends on what they get compared to what they expect. So if there's a mismatch anywhere there between what they expect and what you're going to do, then that can give a bit of a problem. So, and also in the worst case, you might find that some of your stakeholders are against you. So the challenge is to find the requirements that the stakeholders have, and then either meet them or convince them why they're not going to get it. Basically, that's it. Now, sometimes the requirements come from a process. Something has been done that way in a company for years and it's written down. But at the end of the day, the process itself is also owned by somebody. So somebody somewhere is accountable for the process. So requirements for a project come from people. They're not just mechanical things that just happen to be there. And of course, if you're using requirements from a process, maybe the process itself is not up to date, or maybe there aren't enough processes to cover all of your situations. So for example, somebody could go to the moon. These days, they more or less know what to do, vehicle design, rocket launch, all that sort of stuff. You could do that. But if somebody says, well, we want to go to Mars, then there is something beyond going to the moon where we don't have processes. So we have to work it out as we go forward. And that's part of the challenge of that type of project. But a lot of working projects, you don't have to do that. You just use existing process. So who are the stakeholders? Well, the stakeholders are everyone who even thinks they are affected by the project. So as I say, they could be inside the company, they could be outside, they could be senior, junior, and so on. But if they have an interest in your project and can influence it, then you need to know that they exist. So, for example, uh, somebody could not like your project because it makes a lot of noise at night, and instead of coming to you, they go to the police, or or to the television station or something like that. And then they influence your success because you get the message back from a different direction. Oh, you can't do this. We heard, it's not good. So we need to know who the stakeholders are. That's the first thing. And then the project is successful, as I said, when they are satisfied, at least by the end of the project. Maybe as you're going through, they're not so happy. So either we give them what they want, or we understand what they're looking for, and then we explain why it's not going to happen. So, for example, there might be a delay due to an accident, and it makes more sense instead of going into contortions to explain what happened, and then that will affect their expectations, and it's the match between the expectation and what they get that makes them regarded as successful. So in the old days, we used to say a project was delivered within time and budget. It was a good project. But these days, things change literally from one day to the other. It could be a weather or a catastrophe issue, or it could be international finance, or politics. There's all sorts of things that can literally change from day to day. So you don't have that stability that we used to assume. So we need to find who the stakeholders are, including those that give us the assignment, because they're the people we need to keep happy. Or if you've got a project process which is generating the requirements, we need to find out who's behind it. Then we need to go through who's affected by the project. I've got 4 categories here. There are probably more. But for example, if you're using somebody on your project from another department, their line manager is going to be a stakeholder because they're going to lose that person for the time they're working for you. Managers who need the deliverables, they're going to be interested. Maybe you're going to have some colleagues and you're going to need some support. Maybe you want them to do something to free you up so that you can do something, and then they become stakeholders as well. And another category is people we live with. And there are a lot of other categories, by the way. That's just a few of them. So the first thing we do is come up with a list of categories. And here's a list that we have here. Maybe you could add to it. There may be some others that we haven't added to it. But notice that the last one, family and household, they're interested. I mean, if you come home late, or you have your dinner at a different time, or somebody else has to take the kids to school, or if they benefit from your doing this project properly, then very good. Then they're going to be stakeholders as well. Also, authorities, for example, health and safety at work, and a lot that have to do with standards, electrical standards, building standards, whatever it is that applies in your industry. So we need to find out who all the stakeholders are as early as possible, and then engage with them, which means talk to them to find out what their requirements are and to ask what they think about the issues and the risks. And this includes people that are who are supportive, but also people who are not supportive, because if you know why they're not supportive, you've got some chance of actually addressing it, either convincing them that what you're doing is not so bad, or maybe saying, oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, we could adjust our project and then that would meet this particular issue that they have. So we need to find out as many as we can of people who are stakeholders. So the starting place, I find, is a checklist from previous projects. And then these categories that we've just looked at, brainstorm, maybe there are categories that I've overlooked, and then brainstorm to identify individual stakeholders based on your experience. And then when you get all the results of all that, review it with the sponsor and the project team, and you'll get your list. And then all the people that were named as stakeholders, you can go to them and ask them, who do they think is the stakeholder? And when you've done that, you've got a pretty thorough chance of finding most of them. And of course, we need to know who they are, but also their frame of mind. And people, if they're with you, they might be quite positive, but if they're against you, they might just keep quiet and you don't know about it. So you really have to dig a little bit to find out. Okay, so let's have a look at a situation about stakeholders. This is a scenario It's February, so it's early in the year, and you're a consulting engineering company, and you've been awarded a contract to manage the building of a shopping center in a town, a biggish town. They had an old covered market with shops, and they're going to demolish that and use it as an underground car park. So the new building will have a new hotel, fitness center, and will be energy neutral. And this is important, it must be ready for the 30th of November, because in this part of the world, people do Christmas shopping. And as soon as they're into November, certainly December, then everyone is doing their last shopping. So the shop must be open for that. So let's ask some questions. Who are the stakeholders? And I could throw out some names here. Obviously, the people who are promoting it and paying for the building is one. Another group I would think of are the people who are going to work in the shopping center. They want to know, will I have a job before Christmas? There will be probably authorities, local authorities to do with things like building standards, and they'll be interested to know that everything is on course. And also fire department, for example, are going to want to check that places are safe. And if they have a process that takes so many months for them to check it out, you're going to have a big problem trying to accelerate. Are we dealing with individuals or organizations? So at the end of the day, I find decisions are made by people within organizations, but it depends on the part of the world you're in, how that plays out. And if you know who the individual is, then you've got some chance of talking to them and finding out what the issue is. If they're hidden either by an organizational guidelines or maybe by culture, then it's harder to get to them, and then obviously it's harder to actually meet what they're looking for. Do these stakeholders support the rebuilding program? So it could be that some do and some don't, and you need to know who's in favor and who's against you. How are you going to keep these people in positive, particularly the people that are difficult to deal with? So there could be people there, and there could be a particular hot button, as it were. Something about them that they particularly like. I mean, the thing that comes to mind there is people who play golf. The people who play golf, they tend to like other people who play golf. What communications would you need in this sort of situation? Because although the building is in one place, you're not going to bring everyone together for every meeting, not in this day and age. You're going to bring quite a lot of online. And what time of day, and are all your experts in the same time zone? Maybe they're not. Maybe you've got somebody doing part of the design who's in a different time zone. That has to be considered. Who among the stakeholders has the power to stop the project? Well, I mentioned the fire department is maybe one of them. There may be others, but you need to know who they are. And then a general question, is there anything else relevant for stakeholders? So it's really good to ask these type of questions, but these questions are for this situation. If you have another situation or another project, you might have a different set of questions. So you need to be creative and active, interactive there with your team, to ask the sort of questions that challenge you. And this is only in the area of stakeholder. We're not talking about all the planning and costing and all that stuff. So when we communicate in a project, it's with the stakeholders. By definition, the stakeholders are the people that we communicate with. So we're either communicating with individuals or maybe with complete stakeholder groups. So here's a very old model of how do we keep them happy? We can't be in touch with 150 people in 150 different ways. We don't have the time. So this model here, it takes these stakeholders and writes their name on post-it notes and sticks them onto this chart. So people who have more influence are at the top of the chart, and people who have more interest are on the right-hand side. So the people here are the people with high influence and high interest, for example, your boss. And so we're saying, how are we going to communicate with these people? Well, one of the obvious things is to ask them what would they like. And somebody might say, well, you send me, you phone me once a day and tell me everything's okay. I had a boss one time, and he used to say, before you go home, call into my office. And it was a double-edged sword because, of course, if you went early, he knew you were going early. Even if you started very early in the morning, it looked bad and so on. If what he's looking for isn't going to work, maybe time zones. I've seen situations where people, they say, oh, you can come to the meeting and it's actually 4 in the morning for you. say so and look for a different way of doing things, and keep issue and risk logs, because those are things, they're objective things that you can talk about in a meeting with these sort of people, and they may have suggestions to help you. And if the content of those logs is low, well, then you don't need to say it's a message in itself that you have things under control. People over here, they could be, for example, senior managers of the people who are working on your project. So they have a sort of peripheral interest, but they're still pretty powerful. And probably I find the best way to deal with these people is to meet them privately and personally, not by the week. You're not reporting to them. But I would sit down with them in private and say, this is what we're doing. Does that make sense? Am I missing anything? Is there anything you don't particularly like about the project? And then at least you've got some chance of moving forward. The group down here, low power but high interest. For example, the families of employees. If they think that their breadwinner is going to lose their job, for example, then they're going to be very, very touchy. And they have high interest. So what are we going to do? So one of the best things is to recognize that before it blows up, and invite them to private meeting as a group, usually, and tell them what's happening. And say, we recognize that you have a particular need to know what's going on, and here's the story. And the last group I have here is people low interest and low power, but that we might communicate with them with things like blogs, exhibitions. I mean, there was a railway expansion plan near where I live about 10 years ago, and they had a little corner of the railway station where you could go into a room, and it had placards up telling you when they started and who was behind the project and where the money came from and so on. So low-key stuff, but some of the people who are here, they might jump up here. So the reason for doing this exercise is so that you don't have 150 different ways of communicating. You reduce it, to maybe, for these three anyway, are going to be probably 3 approaches. And then the fourth one is going to be more personal. I mentioned the issue log. In agile projects, the issue log is basically updated daily, because what you do at the stand-up meeting is you say, are there any issues? There are different ways of stating that question. Is there anyone you need to talk to? Or is there anything holding you up or something like that? But basically, it's the same thing. So then you need to document this. And one of the ways to do this is to put together a project handbook, which says these are all the things that we're doing. And if you can get a template for that, then it's much easier to do than otherwise. So you're in good territory. And as it happens, that there's a very good methodology called PM squared, which belongs to the European Union. And they have handbooks. They have about 30 different documents you can download. But they have 2 or 3 features. One of them is that the process was put together specifically to simplify for people who are coming into projects who don't have a project background. So it's simplified. Then the documents that they have are all for free. And then when you download them, in each document, there is actually a section on instructions, do this and do that. So if you've got a group of people, and for example, I've got a project handbook here, and I say, I want you to fill out the project handbook for your project, I can say, and please read the instructions. So it goes straight to the people concerned. So it's a really good way of doing it, is writing down your thoughts in all these areas that we've been talking about. How are you going to find out who the stakeholders are? How are you going to communicate with them individually and in groups? How often, and what mechanism, and so on? And it's not just a meeting online. Obviously, there are going to be other things like meet people over coffee, or call them once a day, or whatever it is you're going to do. But it's not going to be as cut and dried as just meetings. So this PM squared, this is the QR code, so you can pull down the handbook, which describes the whole thing. And this here, I've just put it in so that you're aware that it exists. And also it's available in several languages, Spanish, but it's a European thing. So obviously it's going to be in European Union languages. But that covers German and French and so on. So it's a very useful book to have. Within the processes there, you don't have to use all 30 of their templates, but the minimum probably would be these 3: the project charter, what's the project all about, the project handbook, all these things that we've been talking about, the stakeholder, what actually are we going to do, and then an end report. They have a template for that. So now the next job is to plan the communication with your stakeholders. How exactly are you going to find out who they are? How are you going to find out what their interests are? And then sort of categorize them. Basically, you're looking for people who are with you or against you. How are you going to communicate with each group? Yeah, and how are you going to address the interest of these stakeholders and so on? And technically, how are you going to do it? Are you going to have WhatsApp groups, or are you going to have issue logs, or you're going to have a daily telephone call, or how exactly are you going to do it? So this is the outcome of this: is that you with all of this thinking about stakeholders, you think who are the key stakeholders. You don't wipe the others off your mind, but you give them a different communication plan, and then you work out how to do it, and then you do it. So at this stage, if anyone had any questions, this would be a good time to ask them. So just before we close, use cases where Scatterwork might be able to support you. Well, project management these days is either agile or predictive, or waterfall as they call it, or traditional, or it's hybrid. It's a support of those. And here's some agile use cases, situations where you might find it useful to have our interaction to support you. And here are some use cases for the predictive project environment. Again, you may be interested to contact us. So there we go. So to summarize, the people who want the project include the stakeholders. The stakeholders include the group who want the project, who give you the assignment, and they can support you. They have a different point of view to other people who are near because of the shall we say the meeting environment they're in, who they bump into, and so on is going to be different from yours. So they can be very powerful because they can get a word into other parts of the company that you can't reach yourself. And then we need to know what they expect. And then we need to work out with them, well, okay, you're going to get this and you're going to get that. And if there's some of the things that we think that they're not going to get, we need to work that out with them so that they don't get surprises. And then with that thinking, then we have to actually find out who they are and work out how to communicate with everyone. So there you go. I hope that was useful. And thanks very much for listening in.